Super. Thanks. Okay, well, welcome. My name is Tess. I'm the head of market research at HealthXL, a digital health focused community and advisory. I'm really excited to kickstart the conversation on digital health in pharma version 3.0. This webinar today is really a preamble to our Pharma 3.0 Doing Digital Health Better report, which we are launching in the coming weeks. For this report, we spoke to numerous industry leaders and experts to help us understand what's happening in the industry at the moment and what needs to change to successfully drive innovation in and for the pharmaceutical industry. I'm joined today by a truly great panel of experts, Sophie, Matt, and Joe, and I'll hand it over to you to introduce yourselves. Maybe Sophie, you'd like to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone, and thank you for organizing this to HealthXL. I'm excited to be here. I'm Sophie Park. I'm based out of Boston. I'm the managing director for the Bayer G4A organization at Bayer. Very nice to be here.
Great, Matt.
Yep. Hi, everybody, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this as well. I'm Matt Bonam. I head up the digital health group for BioPharma R&D within AstraZeneca.
Great. And Joe.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Matt. Hi, Sophie. So I'm Joe. I'm currently the director for digital health advisory services here at HealthXL. Really excited to be on this discussion with both of you.
Super. Cool. We'll get stuck into the conversation in a minute, but before we do, I just wanted to set the scene for the audience with a short teaser for our upcoming report. Carl, if you wouldn't mind just sharing the screen. Perfect. So what you see here is the cover page of our report, and the premise of this report, and really the conversation today, is centered on the fact that digital health in pharma is continuously evolving. Digital health solutions have the potential to solve many problems for pharma organizations. And while there have been many experiments to unlock the value of digital health for pharma, we're yet to succeed at scale. So on the next slide, we've created a timeline to map out the evolution of digital health in pharma. We've called Pharma and Digital Health 1.0 the testing era, really a period of large-scale testing, experimentation, piloting products, a period where pharma, I suppose, is contemplating the potential synergies of health tech with its product. 1.0 then is followed by what we call 2.0, the innovation era, which sees pharma enter a stage of more advanced experimentation. And this is also a period characterized by major investments in digital health, much of which persists at the onset of the COVID pandemic. But in the last year, amongst the general economic malaise that I suppose 2022 brought with it, digital health innovation has come to be the object of budgetary scrutiny in pharmaceutical companies. And in many ways, the scrutiny has justified a great number of digital health initiatives backed by the pharmaceutical industry, have yet to provide a return on investment, demonstrate significant adoption. Many partnerships have ended, leading observers to question, really what's next for digital health and pharma. And this is where we currently find ourselves, the contemplation area. It has led many to question whether pharma is the right home for digital health. And this is the conversation we're going to have today. To the many expert conversations we at HealthXL have had over the past several months has really led us to the conviction that in many ways, Pharma 3.0, the last phase you see on this slide, will be about building the right foundations for build and scale. It'll be focused on asking the right questions and solving the right pain points with the most appropriate and evidence-based tools. But I won't spoil the discussion too much because I'd like to hear from the panel about what this next phase really means to them. But very briefly on the next slide, Carol, what I wanted to highlight just for the audience is that with the input from thought leaders and experts that we've spoken with for the reports that we are going to launch, we've built a framework for digital health in pharma. And this slide really is a sneak peek of the framework, and HealthXL members will be able to access the details in our upcoming report. But in a nutshell, the framework provides key considerations and prompts pharma to ask better questions to build stronger foundations in digital health. There are 5 components to this framework: determine the fit for digital health, choose success metrics that resonate, rethink resources, partner for a purposeful ecosystem, and tailor business models. And while these themes seem obvious in many ways, the conversations with our experts has made us realize just how foundational they are. The conversation with the panel today will focus on the first 3 themes: determine the fit for digital health, choose success metrics that resonate, and rethink resources. You'll have to wait until the report launch really to get into the insights on the other two. But without further ado, I guess, let's get started with the panel discussion. Super. Okay, so Pharma 3.0, the next phase of digital health in pharma. It's about building stronger foundations. How does this resonate with the group? Would you agree that pharma has yet to build the foundations for its success in digital health? Maybe Sophie or Matt, I see you come off mute first, so you get to go first.
I'm happy to try first. I mean, I think obviously data doesn't lie, and I think we've spent a lot of money on a range of different things with some success and some failure. I think by its nature, whenever you've got any new innovation, you do need to be able to experiment. I think the challenge that we've all faced, and I think fixed at different periods of time, is I think moving, we started with this idea of a set of tools that we were then trying to use. And I sort of always talk about the hammer looking for a nail to hit. We'd got things that were interesting, and we're then trying to find a problem to solve with that interesting thing. I think what I'm now seeing, certainly from within AZ, but across the board, is people being much more focused on trying to understand the problems that we have to solve, or the opportunities we have within our internal value chain, and the opportunities that we see and the problems to be solved in healthcare delivery, or that our patients have, focusing on really truly understanding the problem and then trying to find the right mix of tools to solve that problem, and not being too precious about whether those tools are digital health tools or digital therapeutics or a human at the end of a telephone. But it's actually about sort of thinking about almost a digital transformation rather than digital health. And I think that's where we're now going, is being really clear what's the problem we're trying to solve, what the right toolkit is to solve that problem, and then really measuring whether we're having the impact we're seeking to, and then taking that digital product mindset of being agile in terms of being able to iterate in the product that we have to make sure that we maximize the value. So that's what I would see as, we've gone through a period of experimentation. I think we now understand that what is basically good product development practice, and that's what I think people are applying more. Sophie, I don't know whether you see the same or something different in that.
I would say no. I think you put it really well. And can I sit here and say that pharma has figured it out for success in digital health? I don't think so, and I don't think anyone else has, frankly. Even government. Full stop. So I still think there is a lot of opportunity there. And like Matt said, right, there's now a more focus on understanding, because we have been through this experimentation phase, understanding, who we are serving through these solutions, understanding what these solutions need to look like, understanding the scalability of these solutions, and what does that even mean, right? Not just from a pharma perspective, but also at the end user level. And so focus, I think that's the key word here. There is a lot more focus going into it. It's not now, let's cast a wide net, hope for the best. Let's just experiment, throw some money here, throw some money there, crisscross fingers. So yeah, but I think the focus is the key word here, and everything Matt has said is resonating as well.
I agree with both of you. I also think that there's been an element of market maturity. I think digital health in itself and the industry in itself was evolving. I also agree with Matt and you, Sophie, that there's been a lot of curiosity. There's been a lot of pilots and experimentation. To Matt's point, hammer looking for a nail kind of experimentation has happened as well. And we're definitely seeing that across the industry today. Is when we're talking to different clients, is the focus is what's the pain point, how are we solving? So to Sophie, your point, it's definitely coming back to value. So what's the pain point and how can we support patients and HCPs better? So I think we'll start seeing more of that.
But I will say, I don't think the market is mature yet.
No, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, that is, yeah, okay.
It's still ongoing, so I don't know if it's
still ongoing, and it's still an unending cycle of, we think it's there because there's so much money being put in, but then we see what the value is that comes out, and it's not there yet, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really important point that I sort of get a little bit frustrated at the companies who come and talk to me about the amount of investment they've been able to access, rather than actually talking about the amount of value that they've been able to provide. And I really think, you know, the fact that some people are money-raising machines in this game actually can almost be slightly damaging to the whole area, in a way. And I'm much more of a fan of the people who, you know, some really great companies and CEOs of some really companies that I really respect in this space who, you know, I'm not going to name the individual, but one individual who said to me, I never go and ask a financer for more money than I actually need. And I'm very, very clear what I'm going to spend that money on and the value that I'm going to deliver based on that. And that's, you know, an individual who's then gone on to be able to scale his business and take it into a partnership with another major business because he's gone down that route. And I think that's a very powerful way to go, rather than raising huge amounts of capital and then having a cash flow problem. So that's probably another area that I try and think about in terms of our own internal development as well, of, you know, get the money we need to do what we absolutely need to do and then return value on that investment.
With the current market economic conditions, I think there's a little bit of adjustment happening on that front, Matt. So hopefully we'll see a lot more value-driven conversations.
Great. I suppose one question that I had was really, you know, as internal teams in pharma continue to compete, you know, for want of a better word, compete against each other, you know, for resources, how much focus do you feel pharma is giving to digital health innovation, and how do you see that maybe changing going forward? And, you know, I think it's great we have, you know, three quite different perspectives here, so I'd be keen to hear. Maybe Matt, you'll start us off again.
I can. I mean, from within AZ, we have. We've actually got to a point where now we really don't have internal teams competing with each other in this space. We've been able to bring really strong collaboration across our R&D, medical, and commercial organisations right out into market organisations in this space. That means that we've got that word focus that Sophie talked about. So we do have focus, and actually we have the opportunity to review the strategy and the progress against that strategy with our senior executive team every 2 months. So there's a real focus on this. The key to getting there is we are very tightly aligning what we're doing, as is actually in your report, Tess. We're linking what we do to drive value in our core business strategy predominantly, as well as looking at other opportunities beyond that. But those opportunities are opportunities that we are reviewing at a senior level within the business to make sure that we do the right experiments and we know what the outcome would mean, and sort of bringing that discipline. And so I think having the focus and the discipline around the outcomes is something that's really driving value for us.
Okay. And Sophie, how can accelerators better support internal teams with innovation?
So, right. Again, focus. And I've realized that, you know, working for a pharma company, I mean, we're always iterating on strategy, right? Because digital health is an ever-changing landscape, you know, things change every week, every quarter. And so we need to be prepared to support the best and the brightest that's out there. And in order to do that, it's not, you know, setting certain goals and, you know, sitting on it for a couple of months or even a couple of years. But the way that at least we support through our accelerator or our operational model for these founders is, you know, making sure that the KPIs that we put on some of these companies are also very much aligned with our focus as a company, right? And as Matt said, again, focus into how to better support some of our core businesses. And then ultimately also, you know, because they are an external party, understanding what the value is that they bring to sort of the end customer, because that goal should be the same regardless of whether or not we're pharma or a startup. And so the ways that we support, obviously, I can go on and on about, operational support and giving money, but really the nuances of what differentiates sort of our program is that we are changing and adapting our strategy to not only what the industry requires, but also what Bayer as an organization requires. And, no pharma is perfect, right? And so a lot of these conversations, right? One day it'll be one thing, and then a quarter later, it may change. And so we find partners that are just as adaptable as we are as well. And I think that's hugely important, especially in digital health, just given so many fluctuation and volatilities in the market right now as well.
Great. Joe, is there anything you'd like to add to this?
No, I fully agree. I think given to Sophie's point, exactly, given how the market's changing, even like you presented, Tess, in the last few years, given where we are, I think being agile and being adaptable definitely is a key focus.
Okay. I'd like us to drill down a little bit more on something you've already touched on, Matt, this idea of understanding or determining the fit for digital health and this notion of digital health being, a tool in a much larger toolbox. But I guess, digital health or health tech is not a magic bullet. An app or wearable can't always be the solution. So how do you go about ascertaining the fit for digital health in AstraZeneca? Talk us through that a little bit more in detail.
It's a really good question. I think this, but it's not that different to the development of any product in a lot of respects, in that, step one is to identify and then validate the problem and the value of solving the problem for the stakeholders involved. I think that the development of the product is really about making sure that you're extremely careful, that you've identified the user groups for that product, and that you work with them incredibly closely every step of the journey. And I think it's always useful on a call like this to talk about something that's gone wrong rather than everything that goes right. So, my very first example of this was a program that we'd started to develop in about 2014 for folks with COPD. So for patients with COPD, that was really about trying to identify what was happening to them in the lead up to an exacerbation and help manage them through that exacerbation rather than them finishing up in hospital. And I'll always remember doing a patient panel that the UK NIHR helped us put together as we'd more or less developed this product. And we spent the morning talking to a group of patients who'd not been involved at all in the product design about all of their issues with their care and how COPD was being managed for them. And it was a brilliant morning because I'd got this kind of mental checklist in my head of everything that the thing that we built could do. And they kept telling us about their problems. And I kept thinking, yeah, I could do that one, and I can do that one, and I can do that one. And then the afternoon, they took the product and started to use it. And they didn't just hate it, they almost hated us, because they could see that we did actually understand the problems, but we'd so fundamentally missed what they needed in the solution. And actually, it was kind of we were doing this 300 miles away from where I actually live, so I had a very long drive home that night, which in a very silent car, thinking, well, this is dreadful. But actually, I think what I learned from that is you need to ask people continually about what they need from the solution and check in with them. You also need to make sure that you're in the right environment when you're doing that. So having a conversation with patients, with their physician there, you will get a different set of answers than having conversations with patients on their own. Exactly the same as having a conversation with someone who's a patient who's got one of their carers with them. And so it's about trying to make sure you get the right triangulation of information so that you can build out what people actually want from the product. And then I always say, fall in love with the problem, not with the solution. If you think you've actually created a wonderful tool that solves the problem, but people are telling you that they can't use it, they're telling you that for a reason. And if people would rather have a phone call or would rather have a nurse coaching them rather than it being done with an avatar or whatever it may be, you need to listen to that and not be precious about what constitutes digital health and what doesn't, but actually think I'm solving this problem, I'm going to use the right mix of technologies. So I suppose that was a very long answer, Tess, and sorry for that, but I think it's important to sort of lay out this, that actually getting the right input from all users all the way through your development is the way that you actually determine what the right solution is, not thinking at the start, is this a solution for digital health or for a wearable or whatever, and then almost becoming married to that as a solution.
Yeah, no, not a long answer at all. I think, fully warranted, very candid. So thank you for that. Sophie, anything you'd like to ask, or Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very interesting to hear Matt's experience, because Matt, I went through something similar, launching a pilot program in one of my earlier roles. We spent the day talking to patients, rather weeks talking to patients. We designed all the features that we thought would be beneficial, helping them with their treatment plans. But we didn't really put enough focus back then into how are we acquiring these customers? Where are they finding our solution? Will they download it? They're saying they like these features, but will they find it, download it? And a lot of that was not really we did take them into consideration. We did partner for it, but I think so. Looking back and even sharing your experience, I think 3 or 4 things come to mind. First, I think definitely value. Is it a need to have versus good to have? A lot of the features are good to have. They don't make patients sticking with digital products. They don't make patients good to have products. Don't make patients say, I need to download the app. I need to onboard myself. There's a lot of motivation that's required to do that. So good to have versus need to have in terms of value. Then think through a little bit. Probably I would advise on acquisition and engagement. Pharma is not necessarily good at that because we don't come from tech backgrounds. Onboarding patients onto tech platforms and engaging them on a day-to-day basis or a week-to-week basis is not something that we have in-house. So think through a little bit around acquisition and engagement. And finally, one of the biggest learnings from that pilot that I launched was design. So when we thought about features, we thought all the good features to have, but when you bring that understanding back into pharma's regulations and pharma's frameworks are very different. So when you design that within the regulations and compliance of pharma, and you put that product back out there, for me, it becomes a simple design question. How easy are you making it for the patient to access those features? And in today's world, we have everything from interoperability to integration and a lot of the other challenges. So probably thinking through that, I don't think we'll solve for all of that, but at least taking that into consideration early on is a good way to probably assess fit or even be more aware of challenges that you will run into once you launch these solutions.
Yeah.
I think both Joe and Matthew had really, really great points. The only thing I will add is, we have had certain portfolio companies fail, obviously, failed investments, not going to name who they are. But I think sometimes as an organization that supports a lot of early stage companies as well, I think a lot of companies don't realize when they start building out digital health products is, yes, there's this gap, right? And as Matt said, you need to fall in love with the problem. But also a lot of companies, what I've seen that, don't sort of make it out through the entire lifespan is when it comes to healthcare, there's so many moving pieces, and we know that the entire system is really fragmented, right? And right now, what's happening is there's digital health solutions and people are building digital health solutions for a certain population of patients or certain types of people. But when you start using technology, it's like a completely separate piece you have to think about in terms of usability. Not only desirability, right? Our designers can talk to you about that forever. Not just desirability, but do people even have access to that? I mean, I think as of 2015, only like 75% of American households even had internet, right? And so, part of it is also understanding like where are these end users coming from, because now our market access teams have to understand even further about what accessibility truly means and what does sustainability even mean on top of that, right? We have this great solution, whatever it may be, whether it's a wearable, whether it's a software, whether it's, integrated in a hospital workflow. Is there even an infrastructure, right, to be able to scale that? And so we've had to learn time and time again that, in incremental ways, that it's so much more beyond just looking at this problem and quote unquote filling the gap, because I know pharma loves to say that, right? But then also understanding, what does that gap even mean? And it's not because there's not a solution available out there in the market to address it. Why hasn't it been addressed? Oh, well, maybe it's because people don't even have internet at home. Like, they don't even have service, right? So I don't know, some interesting sort of ways to think about how to scale, because once technology comes into play, it's not just whether or not it works, right? It's not whether or not it, like, quote unquote, shows outcomes and value. Is it desirable? Are people going to even use it, right? Is it going to be like Bejeweled, the game where, it's like you're on the train and addicted to it and continuously playing? Not that I do that, but, or is it going to be, oh gosh, I need to enter in my glucose. How many steps did I take today? It's a completely different level of a user experience that we also have to start thinking about, because it's not a user experience of just that technology in itself. It's the user experience of a patient that's already in a system that's so fragmented and it's like awful to use, aka healthcare. And then you're slapping on a couple of apps, slapping on a couple of websites, couple of logins here and there. So there's still a lot more work to do. Let's put it that way.
A lot to figure out. So, okay, well, I'm sure
if I can just quickly add to that as well, Tess, sorry. So I think everything Sophie said is right. And I think, we have to be realistic about this. There's people with long-term conditions generally, and I'm one of them. You'll have some individuals who are extraordinarily adherent to their self-management program for a long-term condition, but the majority of us aren't. And you have a minority of people who are incredibly adherent to the use of their medication, but the majority aren't. And then we make some wild assumption that because people are using digital products, and we have the kind of, the Bejeweled example, that we're all suddenly going to be massively adherent to the use of this digital solution, and the majority won't be. So I think it's about also trying to, as Sophie said, it's about understanding the experience and how you actually interact with people when you need to interact with them. And for me, any product that will live and die on the basis of somebody having to use it multiple times a day or multiple days in a week, probably you're going to actually end up failing, because humans are humans, and to not adhere to what you're being asked to do is kind of part of the human condition, I'm afraid.
An injection of realism. Well, I think this next line of questioning is probably right up this group's alley. But I want to talk about success metrics that resonate. And I guess, for the most part, when we talk about digital health success in pharma, much of the conversation immediately goes to ROI and how digital has yet to deliver ROI. Is ROI really the North Star for digital health in pharma?
It kind of has to be. We're businesses. We're and as a business, any dollar you invest, you need a return on. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think, it comes back, though, Tess, to what problem are you trying to solve, and can you measure the ROI on solving that problem? And so if you're looking at how you can accelerate drug development, or how you can improve market access, or how you can improve patient use of a product, or you're looking at being reimbursed based on outcomes for a digital therapeutic, you need to look at the ROI on each one of those individually. And I'm sure there are hundreds of other use cases as well for driving value. But I'm struggling to see why we'd invest in things that there is no line of sight to an ROI on.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely agree, Matt. I think pharma is a commercial business model. So like you said, investments will have to tie into either enabling commercial value or indirectly bringing in other forms of return as well. So I don't know, Tess, if ROI is direct or indirect revenue, but it has to tie into revenue directly or indirectly.
And
Okay.
I will jump in here coming from more of like an accelerator perspective, because again, when we have companies coming in with 5 founders, we can't say, we're about to deliver $5 billion in revenue. That's not going to happen. And so the way that we also, I think we need to be flexible in the way that we measure ROI. Obviously, we are business. Understand you can't pay for rent with hugs. That's my saying. But at the same time, we also have to realize that this is still a market that's shaping itself. And really, I can't name one digital health company right now that has made nowhere near $1 billion, maybe in investments and value, but nowhere near that kind of revenue. And so, I don't know, I think we need to also think about the way that we set these KPIs, again, because we have so many partners that we work with, and you look at some of their revenue and it's just sometimes a single digit millions, but they have a lot less VC investment. They're all self-run. And I think that's still very powerful in an industry where, healthcare is just as fragmented as it is. And some of the KPIs that we use, again, as Joe said, there may be some indirect value, right? But again, that indirect value is hugely important, at least for, early to mid-stage companies. Because we're not expecting any of our companies to be an epic, right? That would be the dream, right? And to support them operationally to do that. But at the end of the day, some of the aspects that we look at is, how do we even define what traction even means, right? A part of our diligence, like what does it mean? Does it mean awards? Does it mean, a total number of engagement? And I think a lot of our companies have delivered indirect value. And I think that's hugely important for the business as well. But again, there are some ways to measure indirect value, right? X amount of money saved by identifying X amount of patients within an X amount of time. I'm sure there's a way to do it. But what I'm saying is I think we need to find different ways to set expectations, especially when working with digital health partners. And I'm not going to say startups, like digital health partners and companies, even those companies that are valued at over 100 million, right? I think it's important to set, decent expectations.
Yeah.
So I think this still comes back to, actually, so one of the advantages for a startup in working with Pharma is that Pharma does have, I think, an ability to take a longer term view. More generally, we're an R&D focused business. We understand that there's risk associated with any investment and that you need to be smart about that, but we also understand the cycles of development that you need to go through in order to return value. So I think all of those things are a reason for companies to partner with Pharma. I think then, and I use slightly different language to you, Sophie, but I think you can have value that's being delivered to a business that is about accelerating R&D programs because you can identify potential participants for clinical trials, as an example, through these kinds of programs. That has absolute value for a business. That is different to having reimbursement of a digital therapeutic driving hundreds of millions, which nobody's in that situation yet, but maybe in the future. And so you just need that mixed portfolio of programs, some of which will be returning short-term value because of the way they're impacting on the current pharma value chain, and others that may well be longer-term bets, as you not only have to build the clinical evidence, but also look at what the business model needs to be for those kinds of products. And I think anybody who's wise in this space is going to have a mixed portfolio.
I fully agree. Yeah. I think pharma is a great catalyst for it because as Matt said, we have a broad overview of everything from molecules or even pre that to commercializing and understanding what it's needed to access some of these markets. And a lot of these startups, yes, they're great. There are some really great startups that have, gone direct to consumer, but again, any type of regulatory, hurdles involved, it's always a question of, what is long-term for a startup? But then again, we can go into a completely separate discussion there because, some of the investors on their cap table want a return in 4 years, which we know as pharma, that's probably not going to happen, especially in R&D, right? So, yeah.
So another point that I really liked that you mentioned was expectation setting, because I think internal stakeholders, especially, I think there's a lot of that conversation, even within short term. Sometimes KPIs are not measurable directly. And I think there are a lot of lead indicators that they can use for that conversation. It can be customer engagement, how many people are using your solution, or how many patients you're helping, or many of those, right? So I think the expectation setting has been a huge challenge internally when it comes to ROI conversations.
Is there also something around expectations and sort of timelines, this idea that digital must deliver value much quicker than anything else? And how do you answer those questions?
I don't know if I would say much quicker, I wouldn't say much quicker, but the whole premise of technology, right? The whole value of technology is that it makes people's lives easier. It makes accessibilities a lot more accessible at very cheap prices, right? Sometimes that doesn't quite align with pharma as well, right? We take a long time, right? Usually things are a very expensive process, but I think, at the same time, it's, again, understanding some of these expectations, but again, understanding that digital is, if done right, digital is supposed to alleviate a lot of these issues. And I think that's where pharma is headed, right? With what you kind of had on that curve on Pharma 3.0, with a lot of focus. I do still think that pharma is a great catalyst because we've been through it all, right? We know how to engage with payers. We know how to engage with employers. We understand the market, we know how to access it, but how do we shape that for technology companies? And I'm not going to say digital health companies, but technology companies, right? How do we even scale that in healthcare? And I think we're taking steps in that direction, but I'll let Joe and Matt add to that.
Time for me is an interesting question because although it's technology, we're still talking about healthcare as an industry. We still have regulations, we still have compliance. No matter how fast tech can get, we still need evidence, clinical evidence being built, proof points being built, because it's at the end of the day, it is healthcare. So for me, I think time is an unfair question to ask, saying because it's technology. I think we should talk about, because we're healthcare as an industry, it's going to take the time that it takes in healthcare, and pharma can tell you that there's no quick solutions that you can get to patients.
I think it's like any area of new innovation, people expect a return on it more quickly than reality will actually provide. I think people probably also underestimate the long-term impact it will have.
Yep.
So you expect a return earlier, and you don't expect quite the size of return that you'll get in the long term. And so I think, and I think Sophie said this really well, but I think we do need to be clear as we're looking to solve problems around the timeline it will take to prove that you are doing it, and then to deliver the maximal value from having solved that problem. And I think that we've probably early on in the journey, all of us fallen a little bit into the trap of over-promising from a timeline perspective. But I think we're all getting smarter to that as well.
Yeah.
Nice.
Pharma can be patient. We're very patient.
I like it. What advice do you have for digital innovation teams to tackle questions about commercialization potential and impact? How can you help us guide some of these teams?
Yeah, you've stunned us all into silence, I think, Tess.
Looking at you, Matt.
Yeah, I think. And it's tough when you're then a tech innovation company, because that probably means that you have actually got a piece of technology that you're seeking to sell. And I think you are now more and more engaging with people who are no longer looking at a bright, shiny piece of technology and thinking, let's find a problem that will solve. And so I think if you are a technology company looking to partner, I think you need to be clear that the person that you're partnering with has actually got a genuine problem to solve. It's not that they've been hunting around for something that might fit with what's going to work for you. And so I think having that right alignment of problem and solution is really, really important. I think from my end of this game, then I'm looking to be really clear that the tech partner has the flexibility and the ability to pivot if they need to in terms of the product that they're developing. And then I think, and there's sort of been hints around this from both Sophie and Joe, but I think you do need to look for the right cultural fit as well between the organisations, which I know is sort of stretching beyond your question a little bit, Tess. And a part of that cultural fit is about really understanding what the value is for all partners in solving the problem. You know, the number of people who will come and think that you know, they who overvalue massively the impact that they're going to have as part of a total ecosystem. And I think, you know, we do need to look at the total ecosystem. We need to look at the value that's already been provided from healthcare systems to care for patients, the impact of the total product offering that we have, including the impact of the technology component of that product offering, and be really clear where we see the sources of value and what type of level of value, and set those expectations early so that everybody knows what value that they're likely to get back at the end. And if you can't align on that early, there's probably not a deal to be done. I think the other piece that I sort of want to add here is I think also that I do find that a lot of technology-driven companies don't understand enough about the area of patient risk and their liabilities, or what their liabilities should be in that space. And this might be a little bit of a sort of a controversial area, but you know, a lot of tech companies know that there's a set of regulation that they need to comply with around data privacy, security, those kinds of things. But actually, if you are going to deliver a product of therapeutic benefit, you have to have demonstrated safety and efficacy, and you have to be clear that you've got systems in place that continue to guarantee that over time, and that requires a big investment. And you know, a lot of actually really, really very, very large technology companies don't particularly want to play in that space because they don't want to carry the liability, and I think that's an unfortunate place to be, because I think that's one of the things that's actually going to limit value.
So, Joe, anything to add before I move on to?
No, I completely agree with Matt. I think when it comes to partnerships, probably, I think he's covered a lot of the important points. I think alignment on short-term goals and long-term goals is something that we've been talking as a group as well. Understanding the fit. Not every company or not every solution is going to make the perfect partnership. So understanding that fit, that culture, and most importantly, aligning on short-term expectations, because coming from technology perspective and coming from pharma perspectives, these can mean very different things. So there's, I think, over communication is the solution, but I think having that alignment is going to ease some of the you know, the mismatches in terms of where we should be right now and how are we doing right now, because these are the questions when a lot of investment goes in, we've seen teams face and struggle with. I'm sure Sophie has similar experiences as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And both to Matt and Joe's point, everything there. And, you know, the only additional thing that we can also add is, you know, as also a part of like an accelerator / you know, different operational model that actually like operationally supports some of these early companies, we are so pushy when they come to bring on new investors. Because we know that expectations, not even from healthcare, right? Healthcare has its own set of expectations. Pharma has expectations. Startup has digital health companies have expectations, and investors have expectations. And usually the investors are the ones that are super aggressive on some of these expectations, pushing the companies, you know, find a pharma deal. This is going to be your exit, yada, 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 right? And at the end of the day, you know, what we tell a lot of the companies that we have is, again, like this culture fit, right? That we're just all talking about, you know, healthcare is not a one and done. We're going to set something up tomorrow and be good with. It's an iterative industry. We learn from it. That's what technology is. And so, you know, that's the only thing I can add. Again, you know, just resounding what everyone else has said. But I think ultimately, you know, culture fit is a huge thing, right? And managing a lot of these expectations and also supporting these companies and guiding them to make some of the right decisions as well. Because sometimes they don't, not that they don't know any better, but, you know, we just have this experience of understanding like everything that's needed. And, you know, some of the reasons why we are so nitpicky on evidence and the information, how a protocol is set up, is because, you know, I don't know, I was talking to a startup company one time, and this is a really good example, where they asked me, well, but why do we need it at this time? Like, can't we just wait at, like, you know, it's due in, you know, 24 hours, but, you know, they have an extension, so we're able to do it. But what they don't understand sometimes is that different governing bodies or regulatory bodies in countries are very different. You might be able to pull that off with the FDA and make a call, but you can't do that in France. You miss that deadline, you're going to wait 6 months, you know? And so we understand that it's hugely important to have all this information there and ready to go. And I know that sometimes it's this early company mindset of, yeah, don't worry, like we're going to get it done, but like last minute type. And this is just not, this doesn't settle very well. But again, like investors as well, who are pushing these companies to, you know, bump up their value, get the money through. But it's like Matt said, like very early on, right? It doesn't matter if you have 100 million or 1 million, you know, like the end user isn't going to care about how much value you're worth, as long as you're, you know, as long as your solution's actually working to do whatever it's supposed to do for them. So something important to think about, and to also push these companies in the right direction. And that's also what we're here for.
Sophie, one point that I think I want to add on is the iteration part that you picked up. A lot of the projects that I've done in the past or worked with in the past, I think one of the challenges has been that iteration is the key when it comes to a lot of these experiments and innovation. And the first iteration is most likely not going to be successful. And I think within large organizations in pharma, when we talk about short-term expectations and short-term KPIs, I think we should talk about iterations, because we're probably going to need 4, 5, 6 iterations, and that's okay and that's expected, and that should be built into early conversations, into expectations, and a lot of that. And that's been a huge challenge for me when I was doing these projects as well.
Thanks. On the topic of iteration, moving into the next theme, but somewhat related, iterating organizational structures. So what I want to ask about really is in the broader kind of sense of, you know, resources for digital health. If we think about organizational structures, what do you think, you know, what type of organizational structure will set pharma up for success going forward? I.e., are we talking about central innovation teams? Does, you know, the responsibility lie with R&D? Is it commercial teams? Is it accelerators? What's the setup here that will drive for success? And again, you know, cognizant that we have iterated on this in the past.
I would say all of the above, right? Because I think a lot of these different functions do a lot of different things. And if there was a way to align all of that together, it brings a holistic value. Some companies that come in may need more regulatory support. Some may really need just operational commercial support. Some may need a lot more hands-on or strategic guidance, or just literally introductions to investors. I think, me personally, in an ideal world, everything that you just said should function as one. That would be great. Having the R&D side, having, you know, everything in between where it's more iterative, and then having that commercialization side and having everyone work together. That would be amazing. Wishful thinking? I don't know. It could happen.
Okay. And maybe Matt, I'm sure you'll build on this maybe a little bit, but can I just throw one more caveat into this? Does maybe maturity factor into how this is best set up?
So I think there's a couple of things in this. I think, and I agree with what Sophie said largely, but I think the core thing that we need to get to is to make sure this isn't sort of an ivory tower outside of the core business.
Yeah,
I think that's probably, any model beyond that will then work, provided you've got that real alignment to the business itself as you're trying to get to a level of scale and demonstrating value for the business. So I think that's sort of a really important aspect. I do then agree with Sophie's response of having, you've then got different jobs to do. You absolutely need to innovate. You absolutely need to then develop and generate evidence. You absolutely then need a go-to-market strategy and a way of commercializing. If that, if it's a for patient or healthcare system program or product, and so that actually means that you're better off having an organisation that can sit across the business units, but it has to be integrated within those business units, and that for me is the absolute key to this.
business focus key word here in this conversation. Yeah.
Okay. Joe, do you have anything like that?
I fully agree. I fully agree. I've been part of central teams, but at the end of the day, it has to integrate back into business. It can't be, like Matt said, an ivory tower to the side. Even when there are central teams, they have to align with business objectives and commercial objectives and work within the goals and frameworks of the commercial teams. So it can't be. It helps when you have a central innovation team that's probably bringing in new ideas, but after the initial outside the box thinking, they have to work more cohesively with the internal cross-functional team. So to Sophie's point, wishful thinking, all the teams working together with all the things that we've discussed so far.
I mean, I think we have to be very, very careful because words matter. And we're all working in healthcare and in pharma companies where actually innovation is day-to-day business. And so even the language of saying we have a central innovation team is probably kind of slightly offensive to 90% of the business who are innovating every day anyway. And so I think what you're talking about is having a central digital capability team who have all of the steps in the development cycle within them that are fully embedded into the core business to deliver the value from the products that they develop. And so I think that's a big challenge. And then one other thing which I'd love, Joe and Sophie, your views on, but is sort of what mix then in that team needs to be core pharma healthcare knowledge versus people who are technologists who perhaps haven't worked in healthcare before, and what the right mix is. Because I think if you go too far in either direction, you either don't get the degree of kind of freedom of thinking that you get from people who are technology focused, or you get all of that freedom of thinking but no way of actually placing it in the business.
Yeah,
oh, go ahead, Joe.
No, I don't know if there's a perfect answer. You do need core commercial pharma experience and probably technical skills supporting that and enabling that. I think Sophie earlier said technology is a catalyst, and I think that's probably a consideration to have is build the technology teams around the core business teams to support and enable them. But again, I'm happy to take both of your lead on this.
No, I was almost going to say, I mean, this really goes back to, again, I think culture as well. I think ultimately at the end of the day, people are our strongest and proudest, asset within an organization. But again, as you said, Matt and Joe, you can't have everyone, working in, general digital health, right? And then everybody working in, the functional aspects of it. I mean, there definitely needs to be a good balance, but I think maybe this goes back to also cultural fit, because again, there's a lot of iterations that need to happen. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of pivots. I mean, even just G4A alone, we've been around for 10 years and our team made this map, right? And almost every 2 years, there's been a major pivot, right? Or even a year, or even like 6 to 12 months. And so I think, but not everyone is acceptant of that, I guess. Like that's not acceptable to everybody in the way that they work. But I do think that ultimately at the end of the day, it's a huge cultural fit as well, right? Things move very quickly. Sometimes I get emails where it's like, I need this when you wake up, you know? And so, and it's like, I can't say no because they really do need it when I wake up, right? And so it's a different way of working. It's, you know, back to the grind. And I know a lot of startup people can say that. I used to work for a startup in the past, but I don't know. I think it goes back to cultural fit, right? Because there's going to be a lot of failures, right? There's going to be a lot of failures and we're going to have to be okay with that, right? And really the only function in pharma that goes through a lot of failure is usually R&D, right? Because we test all the time. We test all the time, hoping that a molecule, you know, works out, spend a lot of money on it. And I was actually speaking to a couple of R&D colleagues and that's exactly what they said. They're like, oh yeah, but like, you know, we expect there to be like a 98% failure rate. I mean, but that's research, right? But again, in commercialization, that's kind of unheard of, right? So I do think it's cultural, but again, like the openness to get things done and a good balance between the characters of what's needed and the capabilities, right, of people.
Nice. I actually did not realize how quickly this hour has gone. We've 3 minutes left. I didn't get through even half of my questions, which is excellent. I think there's absolutely a case to be made here for a part 2 of this webinar. There's also been so much activity in the Q&A. I think we've touched on some of these questions throughout, but I suppose really, you know, to sum this up, and I suppose what I've kind of heard from the panel is that, you know, Pharma is a catalyst for digital health. Pharma needs digital health as a tool in its toolkit. If I could just have one last question thrown at the panel and really to help us wrap this up, but you know, one tangible learning from the past that can really help pharma navigate the next phase for digital health from each one of you.
Sorry, you cut off for me at the very end there.
Sorry, one tangible learning from the past endeavor that can help pharma navigate the next phase for digital health.
So I'm going to repeat something that I've already said, but for me it's so important, which is focus on the problem, not the solution. And then to build on that, involve every stakeholder who is involved in solving that problem when you're developing the solution.
Nice. Sophie?
I'm going to say trust and transparency, because I do think that, you know, generally in healthcare, there's a long way to go. But also, I think this is something that when you even develop or even start working with external partners, it's also something that's very much needed. So I'd say, yeah, trust and transparency.
And I agree with both of you. Just to build on that, I think it is definitely fit. I think, Matt, you had similar thoughts as well. So it's fit, and then probably something that we've been discussing is expectation setting early on, having that clarity on what short-term and long-term looks like.
Thanks. Well, thank you so much for a really, really great discussion. Definitely a part 2 on the card, I'd say. But for everyone that's listening, thank you so much. Our report will be launched very soon. It will be accessible to HealthXL members. And yeah, we look forward to continuing the conversation on Pharma 3.0 and the next phase for digital health. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thanks
everyone.